There are certain people who never need to raise their voice to destroy your confidence. They smile softly, speak carefully, and listen patiently. And somehow, by the end of every conversation, you're the one apologizing for pain they caused. 22-year-old Ava Mitchell understood that feeling better than anyone. The terrifying part was that she didn't realize it was happening at first. To everyone around her, Ethan Cole looked perfect, intelligent, mature, emotionally stable. The kind of man parents trusted instantly and strangers admired within minutes. He volunteered at community events, remembered birthdays, held doors open, and carried himself with the calm confidence of someone who always seemed completely in control of himself. When Ava met him during her final year of college in Chicago, she felt safe almost immediately. After years of emotionally unavailable relationships and chaotic situationships, Ethan felt different, stable. That was the word she repeated. Most often when describing him to friends, stable, she had no idea stability could be performed so convincingly by someone who needed control more than connection. At first, Ethan felt like peace after years of emotional noise. He brought coffee during late-night study sessions, remembered tiny details nobody else noticed, and sent thoughtful good-morning texts every single day without fail. Ava loved old indie songs from the early 2000s, and somehow Ethan remembered every artist she mentioned casually. When she got anxious before presentations, he squeezed her hand beneath the table and whispered, calming things that made her feel seen. Slowly, Ava started believing she had finally found someone who truly understood her. But manipulative people rarely destroy your reality immediately. First they study it, then they reshape it slowly enough that you mistake the damage for love. Ethan never controlled Ava directly because that would have been obvious. Instead, he questioned her reality in ways that sounded caring. "Are you sure your friends really respect you?" he asked casually one night after Ava came home upset from dinner with coworkers. Another time he smiled gently and said, "People take advantage of how emotional you are." At first, those comments sounded protective, loving even. But over time, they started reshaping how Ava saw herself. Every insecurity she shared somehow returned later disguised as concern. Every fear became evidence that she needed Ethan's guidance. And because Ethan always sounded calm, while Ava sounded emotional, she slowly began trusting his version of reality more than her own. That was how the confusion began, quietly, patiently, like water slowly filling a room while nobody notices, until it becomes impossible to breathe. For years, Ethan repeated the same idea in different forms. You think too much. You overreact. You misunderstand people. Eventually, those sentences stopped sounding like opinions and started sounding like facts. And slowly, Ava began hearing Ethan's voice inside her own head. One snowy evening, Ava arrived at Ethan's apartment, unexpectedly, after her night class ended early. The hallway was quiet, except for the sound of Ethan laughing softly inside. Ava smiled automatically, because she hadn't heard him laugh like that in weeks. Warm, relaxed, alive. But the moment she reached the door, something inside her stomach tightened. His voice sounded different somehow, more intimate, more real. She froze outside the apartment, while his laughter softened into a quieter tone. "She still believes I'm helping her," Ethan said calmly. Silence. Then another male voice laughed through the speakerphone. "That's because you know exactly how to handle girls like her." Ava stopped breathing. Ethan laughed again softly. "Honestly, once someone starts doubting themselves, they'll defend you for things you didn't even do." The hallway suddenly felt too small, too hot, too quiet. Ava's fingers tightened around her car keys so hard the metal pressed painfully into her skin. Her chest felt hollow as years of conversations replayed differently inside her mind. Every apology, every argument where she somehow became the problem. Every moment Ethan made her feel irrational for reacting to something painful. Her body recognized the truth before her brain fully accepted it. And somehow, the worst part wasn't hearing him manipulate her. It was hearing how easy it sounded. Like practice, like strategy. Like he had done it for so long, it no longer even required effort. Ava quietly stepped away before Ethan noticed she was there. By the time she reached her car, her hands were shaking so violently she could barely unlock the door. Snow pressed softly against the windshield, while memories rearranged. themselves into something terrifyingly clear. Suddenly she remembered every conversation where Ethan stayed calm while she cried. Every moment he smiled patiently while explaining why her feelings were misunderstandings. Every time he made her feel guilty for questioning behavior that hurt her. Then the realization hit her so hard she physically covered her mouth to stop herself from crying. The terrifying part wasn't that Ethan lied. It was realizing Ava had started using his voice inside her own head. That night she barely slept. Around 3 in the morning, she opened old text conversations between them, and for the first time, she stopped reading emotionally. She started reading objectively. Patterns appeared everywhere. Whenever Ava expressed hurt, Ethan redirected attention toward her reaction instead of his behavior. Whenever she confronted him, he responded with disappointment instead of accountability. I can't help you if you refuse to trust me. You always assume the worst about people who care about you. I'm worried you're becoming emotionally unstable. At the time, those messages sounded supportive. Now they sounded strategic. And for the first time in years, Ava stopped wondering if she was the problem. The next morning, Ethan called 3 times before she answered. Hey, he said gently. You disappeared last night. Everything okay? Ava almost laughed, hearing how normal he sounded. For years, she believed manipulation would sound cruel if she ever experienced it. She never imagined it would sound calm, caring, patient. I heard your conversation, she said quietly. Silence filled the phone. 2 full seconds. Then Ethan sighed softly like a disappointed parent. Ava, that single word carried more emotional pressure than shouting ever could. You misunderstood what you heard. There it was instantly. Not concern, not honesty, confusion. Ethan's first instinct wasn't explaining himself. It was making her doubt herself again. I heard you talking about manipulating me. Ethan gave a small, tired laugh. You're spiraling right now. Spiraling. Another carefully chosen word designed to make her emotions sound dangerous instead of reasonable. You've been stressed for weeks, he continued calmly. This is exactly why I worry about you. Sometimes, months, earlier that sentence would have shattered her emotionally. She would have apologized within minutes just to restore peace between them. But something had changed outside Ethan's apartment door. Once manipulation becomes visible, it starts losing power. For the first time in their relationship, Ava stopped defending herself. She stopped explaining, stopped trying to convince Ethan to understand her pain, and somehow the silence unsettled him more than anger ever could. You're not even listening to me, he said carefully. Ava noticed the shift immediately. Beneath the calmness, irritation was beginning to crack through the performance. No, she replied softly. For the first time, I think I finally am. Ethan went quiet again. Ava could almost feel him recalculating the conversation in real time, searching for another strategy. Then his voice softened dramatically. After everything I've done for you, this is what you think of me? Guilt. Another familiar weapon. And suddenly Ava realized something painful. Ethan treated love like debt. Every kind gesture became emotional leverage during conflict. Every supportive moment became evidence that she owed him trust no matter what he did afterward. I don't think you ever wanted a partner, Ava whispered quietly. I think you wanted someone easier to control. For the first time, Ethan didn't answer immediately. Very slight changes in his breathing told Ava more than words ever could. Throughout their relationship, she had always been the emotionally cornered one. Now the discomfort belonged to him, where it always should have been. Over the next several days, Ethan sent long emotional messages apologizing without truly admitting anything. I hate that you see me this way. I was only trying to help you grow. You know I care about you more than anyone else ever has. Every message sounded sincere enough to create doubt again. That was what made emotional manipulation so dangerous. Rarely does it feel completely fake. Ethan probably did care about Ava in his own distorted way. But caring about someone is not the same as respecting their reality. Slowly, Ava started understanding something powerful. Love that requires confusion to survive is not love that protects you. One afternoon, her best friend Mia visited carrying coffee in takeout containers. Halfway through the conversation, Mia looked at Ava carefully and asked quietly, You know what scares me most? Ava frowned slightly. What? Mia hesitated before answering. You spent so much time trying to prove you weren't crazy. You never stopped. To ask why someone who loved you benefited from making you feel that way. The sentence hit Ava harder than anything else so far, because deep down, she already knew the answer. Weeks later, Ava agreed to meet Ethan one last time at a quiet cafe downtown. Rain tapped softly against the windows, while people hurried beneath, umbrellas outside. Ethan looked exhausted when he walked in, but even then, he carried himself with the same calm control that once made Ava trust him completely. For the first 20 minutes, he mostly talked about himself, his difficult childhood, his fear of abandonment, his loneliness, the pressure of trying to hold the relationship together. Ava listened quietly while noticing something painful but important. Even now, Ethan experienced the relationship mainly through the lens of how it affected him. Slowly, Ava started understanding something powerful. Love that requires confusion to survive is not love that protects you. One afternoon, her best friend Mia visited carrying coffee in takeout containers. Halfway through the conversation, Mia looked at Ava carefully and asked quietly, "You know what scares me most?" Ava frowned slightly. "What?" Mia hesitated before answering. "You spent so much time trying to prove you weren't crazy. You never stopped. To ask why someone who loved you benefited from making you feel that way." The sentence hit Ava harder than anything else so far, because deep down, she already knew the answer. Weeks later, Ava agreed to meet Ethan one last time at a quiet cafe downtown. Rain tapped softly against the windows, while people hurried beneath, umbrellas outside. Ethan looked exhausted when he walked in, but even then, he carried himself with the same calm control that once made Ava trust him completely. For the first 20 minutes, he mostly talked about himself, his difficult childhood, his fear of abandonment, his loneliness, the pressure of trying to hold the relationship together. Ava listened quietly while noticing something painful but important. Even now, Ethan experienced the relationship mainly through the lens of how it affected him. Eventually, he looked at her with tired eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you." Ava believed him. And strangely, believing him changed. Nothing anymore, because intentions could not erase patterns. Ethan leaned forward carefully. "But you have to admit, you weren't always easy to love, either." There it was, small, subtle, almost invisible. The final attempt to place part of the damage back onto her shoulders. Years earlier, that sentence would have emotionally destroyed her. Now Ava simply looked at him calmly across the table. "No," she said softly. "I was difficult to manipulate once I started trusting myself." Again, silence filled the cafe, heavy, unavoidable. For the first time since they met, Ethan looked away before she did. That moment mattered, more than Ava expected, because throughout their relationship, she had always been the one retreating emotionally first, the one apologizing, the one doubting herself. Now the silence belonged to him. Ava stood slowly and reached for her coat while rain continued, tapping softly against the cafe, windows behind them. Ethan suddenly looked nervous in a way she had never seen before, not because he was losing control of her, because he already had. "So that's it?" he asked quietly. Ava paused near the table before answering honestly. "No," she said softly. "It ended the moment I stopped needing your version of reality more than my own." Then she walked outside into the cold evening air. Cold wind touched her face. Traffic lights reflected across wet sidewalks, and suddenly her body felt light. Not healed completely, not happy, but free. Weeks later, Ava found herself rediscovering tiny parts of herself she thought she had lost forever. Singing while cooking dinner, calling friends without replaying conversations afterward, sleeping peacefully without arguments, echoing through her mind at 3 in the morning. Healing didn't happen dramatically. It happened quietly, slowly, like returning home after being lost somewhere so long you almost forgot who you were before you disappeared. One night, Ava stood beside her apartment window, watching city lights flicker across the glass. For years, Ethan told her she thought too much. Truth was, she noticed too much. And that became the real reason she was dangerous to him. Because manipulative people survive inside confusion. The moment clarity arrives, their control begins collapsing. The most dangerous people are not the ones who scream at you. They're the ones who teach you to question your own reality while smiling. And the woman Ethan called too emotional was never broken. She was simply surrounded by someone who needed her to distrust herself in order to feel powerful.